IDF troops are concentrated on the border with Gaza and ready to start moving, but Israel's political and military leadership is split and cannot decide when to advance or whether to do so at all. This was revealed by 7 senior Israeli army officers and 3 civilian leaders. Specifically, they said the delay is intended to give negotiators more time to free the 200+ hostages being held by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups that seized the men 3 weeks ago during an attack on Israel. But the Israeli leadership, which has promised Hamas retribution for its brutal massacre of civilians, has yet to agree on how to do that. Although the military could begin fighting as early as Friday, some in the leadership believe that by entering Gaza, the Israeli army will get bogged down in heavy urban fighting. Others fear the conflict will widen, and that the Hamas-affiliated Lebanese militant group Hezbollah will start firing long-range rockets into Israeli cities. There's also the debate over whether to conduct one major operation or break it up into a series of smaller ones. And then there are questions about who will run Gaza if Israel takes it over. There is a cabinet, and there are many different opinions in it, said senior lawmaker Danny Danon of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing Likud party. Some say we should start, and we can think about further steps later, continued Danon, who serves on the Israeli Parliament's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. But as leaders, as statesmen, we must set goals, and those goals must be very clear. There should be no uncertainties. Terrorists from Gaza attacked Israel's southern region, killing an estimated 400 people and briefly seizing more than 20 villages and army bases. They outsmarted the strongest army in the Middle East, and there has been confusion in Israel ever since. The shock of the attack was so strong that it shook Israeli's sense of invincibility, heightened doubts and sparked a debate about how the country should best respond. Immediately after the Hamas attack, the government called up some 360,000 reservists, deploying most of them on the Gaza border. High-ranking officials soon began talking about stripping Hamas of power in the enclave, and this gave the impression that a ground operation was imminent. But nearly 3 weeks have passed, and the Netanyahu government has yet to give the go-ahead to launch an invasion. True, the military says it has made several brief raids across the border and will continue such actions. In the coming days, the United States has urged Israel to rush into a ground invasion, although it has pledged its full support to the ally. But domestic political considerations are also playing a role in the delay. There is concern about the hostages, but not only. Many people think about the casualties of the operation, the uncertainty, and what it means to destroy Hamas. After all, it is not only a paramilitary group, but also a social movement deeply embedded in Gaza society. Asked about the military objectives of the operation, an Israeli army spokesman said they were to eradicate Hamas. But how will the army realize it has achieved that goal? That's a big question, and I don't think I have the ability to answer it right now. That spokesman, Richard Hecht, said at a briefing a week after the attack. The immediate issue is the fate of the hostages. Negotiations are now underway, mediated by Qatar, for the release of at least some of the captured men, according to one Israeli official, 3 senior army officers, and a foreign diplomat familiar with the details of the talks. The Israeli government needs more time to get results in these negotiations and return at least the captured women and children. There is little internal disagreement over the allocation of additional time for the talks, but there is debate between military commanders and Netanyahu government officials over what to do. If the talks fail, the military command has already agreed on an offensive plan, but Netanyahu refuses to approve it, causing resentment among senior officers. This is partly because the Prime Minister wants unanimous support from members of the wartime cabinet he formed after the 7th of October. This was revealed by people who attended the cabinet meetings, who asked not to be named because of the sensitive issues involved. Analysts believe that Netanyahu is afraid to give a one-man command to launch an operation. Public confidence in the Prime Minister is already declining, and he fears that if the operation fails, he will be blamed. Netanyahu's office declined to comment, advising him to pay attention to a speech the Prime Minister gave Wednesday night. In it, he promised to destroy Hamas, but did not specify how or when that would be done. This ambiguity appears to reflect disagreement within the cabinet over whether to launch a full-scale invasion of Gaza. If it is carried out, ground troops could get bogged down in heavy urban fighting, where they would be confronted by thousands of Hamas militants hiding in the vast network of tunnels dug hundreds of kilometers deep underground in Gaza City. Instead, ministers are considering a less ambitious plan, with several more limited incursions in target and scope. They would be carried out one by one, each in a small part of the Gaza Strip. The military establishment is concerned that the invasion goals will not be achieved if Netanyahu keeps his Wednesday pledge to try to simultaneously secure the release of all hostages and the destruction of Hamas. To achieve the first goal requires negotiation and compromise with the Hamas leadership, and to achieve the second, Hamas must be eliminated. Finding a balance will be very difficult, senior military officials say. A sign of the internal contradictions was Thursday's statement by Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who, while talking about Israel's military goals, tellingly did not talk about the rescue of hostages. Mutual suspicion between the military and the Prime Minister is so strong that civilian employees do not allow the military to bring recording equipment to cabinet meetings. The military sees this as an attempt to limit the amount of evidence that can be presented in a nationwide investigation after the war. Since the Hamas attack, Netanyahu has found himself in unusual isolation. His popularity in opinion polls has plummeted, and the Prime Minister has faced accusations of chaotic leadership over the past year, allegedly setting the stage for the catastrophic security failure that occurred on the 7th of October. Now few in the government are unequivocally backing Netanyahu. Many simply say that analysing the government's mistakes should wait until the war is over. Now that the mutual recriminations have sounded, some allies are trying to deflect blame from the Prime Minister. A former Netanyahu aide has launched a social media campaign pushing for continued Israeli airstrikes on Gaza until the ground operation begins, and Ari Aderi, a lawmaker and longtime supporter of the Prime Minister, told an interview Monday that the army had only recently finalized a plan to invade Gaza. Israeli media interpreted the statement as an attempt to show that it was the army, not the Prime Minister, that needed the extra time to prepare. But the consequences of the Hamas attack are not limited to Netanyahu's personal fate. Analyst Plasner said, the shock of the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, when Arab armies briefly breached Israeli defenses before being repulsed, changed Israeli society and the trajectory of the Israeli state, he said. These events will perhaps have even more profound consequences, Plessner added. Authors Patrick Kingsley and Ronan Bergman